So let's get on and look at this North Celestial Pole, what I am calling and what other people are referring to as the tree, or the pole of heaven, or the centre of heaven, which of course is Polaris. And this of course is the throne of God, as spoken of in the Bible, in chapter 22 of Revelation and so forth. And this is the Celestial Mountain. So the reason why we're looking at this, and we're just going to look at this on the last video there, I looked at below this, we looked at, if I take the ground away again, we looked at the celestial, and then below that there's another level, and that of course is the tree of good and evil, the third level down, and it's wheels within wheels, really, and these wheels move around, and they give us the reality of time, which we live with and have to deal with now. So if I take this land away again, and let's begin by looking not to the three parts, but breaking down each of the three parts, and looking first of all to the north, most northerly part, which is what the Bible itself and other books, including the Quran, as I mentioned in the last recording there, all the good books and all the spirituality and all the religions and all the teachings across the world, whether it's Mayan, Incan, Buddhist, theist, it all comes back to this North Celestial Pole. They're all referring back to this story of the seven lights of heaven, the Brahma and the Great Swan, and the dragons and Katsukulu. So, I had to stop the recording there was a bit of interaction, disturbance in the speakers, so hopefully I've unplugged it and hopefully we're back to normal. So, what we're looking at here is the throne of heaven, and the Celestial Mountain, the Tree of Life, and it can be found at the very centre of our world, and that's how the ancient people seen this tree. It was at the very centre of the world. So for those who are trying to work out the shape of the earth, what I've ventured into is it's been quite useful for me, because I was part of the flat earth sort of belief movement. But what I've discovered is the earth is flat, but it's not flat as the flat earth movement and other such movements. It's not concave, it's not all these things are all put in our way to stop us to looking to the very North Pole and to the seven lights of heaven. And when we understand that this is the Tree of Life, and that the other two realms below are indeed realms, where the lowest realm is the material world, and the middle ground is you keeping your head above water sort of thing, out of the law, the maritime fraud, and this third heaven here is the place where all religions believed this was the gate to eternity, to escape, the way out, to get off the ship as such. And so we're going to look at this centre throne, because it's this centre throne in heaven where the Almighty Creator is seated, viewing the totality of all His creation. And if we want to understand or understand how this creation works, we need to understand or understand that this is the station of the Most High, the God, the Eye of God, is to say. It's the point in our heavens, and it's the most obvious point in the heavens, where God, the Creator, views our backsliding, because it's falling away from the celestial pole, the North Pole or Eden, that is our biblical backsliding. We chase after the material carnal world, and God sits here at the throne of heaven calling us to return. But to understand these stories, we need to understand how the ancient cultures seen each of these seven constellations. So the seven constellations that are, or seven asterisms that are up there, of course, are Hercules, Draco, and I'll get to why later on, why Draco's there, It's very important. People will probably think, well, why is Draco there? That's the enemy, but Draco is there. We have Lyra, we have Cygnus the Swan, we have the house of Cephas and Cassiopeia, and Andromeda, but really Cephas and Cassiopeia is the house. The Egyptians seen it as the Iron Throne of Osiris, and it's the last house you went through. The Greeks seen it as the house of Kepha or Kepa or Kephas, the rock, or Cephas. It was the rock of creation, yes. You can see how close it is to the pole star. So it was the foundation stone. And what I'm going to look at as well, we're going to look at, first of all, we're looking at the 7 here. Sorry, I got sidetracked there, but the 7 are Hercules, Draco, Ursa Minor, Ursa Major, of course, Cephas, Lyra. And they are the 7 lights, which, as I mentioned in the first video, are the 7 branches of the Hebrew menorah. So the crazy thing is, people have been turned against a religious movement known as Judaism or Orthodox Judaism, and people have been turned against Islam, and people have been turned against Christians, and people have been turned against atheists. But all these stories, as I said in this first recording, are this retelling of this story in the heavens. And if you were a Muslim, this would move in an anti-clockwise direction, you see, and this is what you would do as a Muslim. You would go around the Kaaba stone in an anti-clockwise direction, as the heavens themselves move, and the sun will move through in a clockwise direction, and you would go the opposite way round the Kaaba, throwing stones at the 360 deities until your 360 stones was up, and you would go away. But it just represents this in the heavens, and this same 7 lights, or perpetual lights in heaven, which we're told to keep lit in the house of God in the Old Testament, in Exodus and Leviticus and so on. These are the 7 perpetual lights of heaven, which never go out. And these were the navigational signs, and Polaris was, for even now, anyone who navigates the seas. Polaris is, well, we have technology now that they probably didn't use them in boats and craft way back, but maybe they did. But Polaris is the North Star, and by knowing where the North Star is, you knew your directions as an astronaut or a sailor. Anyway, so these 7 hills, yes, the 7 hills of God, these 7 hills, or these 7 lights that sit upon the mountain of God, are Hercules, Draco, Ursa Minor, Cephas, Cygnus, Lyra, Ursa Major, and these are the 7 perpetual lights of Eden, which circumvent the pole star. And it's so important because this is the tree of life. So to understand all of them, people often say to me, how do you get all this? How do you understand? Is there anything I can read or any videos I can watch? And really, there is nothing I can say apart other than what I've already suggested. The Gary Belcliffe books. You maybe read Combs Beaumont's books. That will help you in a geographical, sort of political, and a religious sort of way to understand some of the scriptures. Watch a lot of stuff of William Donohue on YouTube. The list, there's an endless list, and if you are familiar with my Facebook page, I will put a list of books and that up there. If you're not on Facebook, then what I will do in an upcoming post is put together a list of the material where I draw my material from. But you cannot know this, and the people perish, really, as the Bible says, for a lack of knowledge. But you cannot know this unless you study it, if you take the time to study it. And once you study it, it's astounding. I've been on this journey for a very long time, but everything we read in the Bible is right here. I don't want to give the game away too much here, but this here, I'll just give this away. This is beautiful. There's verses in the Bible. I've made a post or 2 on Facebook about this, but there's verses in the Bible that talks about it's easier for a rich man or a noble. A rich man is a noble, and a noble one is a fallen star, a noble, Baal, a noble. The nobles came and took over the estates in Britain. But anyway, Jesus was a druid, and he said, it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than it is for a noble or a rich man, material world, the material man, those who are based on the lower flesh, to enter the kingdom of heaven. And this here is the kingdom of heaven as we go round Let's jump through as months. As you go round in an anti-clockwise direction, you'll see that Polaris, the little bear, his tail never moves. It's beautiful, this. But you'll see here too, also, the camel, Camelarpodus. It's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than it is for a rich man, material world, to enter the kingdom of heaven. You'll see that the camel, as it circles round and round and round in its stations, it represents the Spartans, the spirit, the Sparta, the spirito, and it also represents a clan in Scotland. In fact, they were called the Campbell clan, and that's where the name Campbell comes from. In fact, I'd be as well to mention this as well. What we're facing just now is the stage show of the heavens with the election. Who will be Trump? Who will be president? Who will be top dog? And Kamala is right there, the camel, Camelarpodus, a half leopard, half. On this software, it doesn't look like a leopard; it just looks like a giraffe. But it's called Camelarpodus. And that's Kamala Harris. And the reason why Harris is because Harishon, Bereshit bara Elohim, Bereshit bara, Bereshit. The word Berosh is Harosh, Harrison, the first, Harishon, the first Adam, or the first creation. And Camilla Harishon, or the camel, never, ever, ever gets into the gate of heaven. It misses it every time. It doesn't matter how many times you spin round and how many centuries. You can go back 8,000 years, you can go back 10,000 years, you can go back 17,000 BC. The camel sadly never gets its head in. And yeah, in Scotland, because this is Polaris, if you follow my work, Polaris is over the very north of Scotland, and this is the central belt down here. If I take the land away again, if I take the land, we really do want to focus on this 7 lights of heaven and the story of each one, but if we look down here, this is the central belt, which is all Orion's belt, and this is central Scotland, and that's why it's called Central Belt. But down here, this is where the story of the Campbells came down, and they fought the Dons and the Donalds at Loch Lomond, and you know. But again, the reason why the story's there, and Jesus the Essene the Druid told the story, is because he would have been familiar with the story of the Spartans and the Camelarpodans and the Campbells, Campbells. It's all there in the words there. Campbell. We have a place in Falkirk, just there, Cameldon. I can't remember how you pronounce it, but that was the headquarters, or the base, where the Campbells had their base, and the Spartans were based there too. That was the land of Sparta, what we understand or know today as Falkirk and sort of Grangemouth area. That was the land of the Spartans, and it's all written in the heavens. And of course, that was the land of the Spartans. What I'm insinuating here is this is Greece, and of course that this is Greece, because if you've watched other videos of mine, you will know that this is the tree of life. This is the knowledge of good and evil, and this is the lower world, the Kabbalah tree. And you know, this is the poles of heaven, the 3 poles of masonry, the 2 pillars of masonry, and in the centre that's the path known as Jacob's Ladder, which takes you up into the house of Cephas, into Cygnus the Swan, passing the Draco, and into Polaris through the house, which is the Iron Throne of Osiris. But again, I have sidetracked myself, but I'm trying to give an overall feel of what it is to people and how it lays over the British Isles, and especially at this moment in time in Scotland. As we look at each one of these lights, the 7 perpetual lights up here, as we look at Draco, Cephas, and the mythology behind each one of them, and according to each culture, you'll begin to see things that help you piece it together, as I've had to piece it together, because there are no books out there to put all this together. But I am in the middle of producing some books. At the moment it's probably 4 books, 5 books. I know for definite there will be 4 books, possibly 5, and there's potentially another book, a 6th book, which I'll bring out. I've already got in my head what that's going to be. It's called Spiritual Soup, and it's basically taking all this the other books and all this information. I have to put it in so many books because there's so much, including the legal fraud, how it ties into it, how we tie into it as the created being and the living being and the Elohim. So I've had to put it into a number of books, and there definitely will be 5 books, I reckon, but a 6th book will help people, and it will be called Spiritual Soup, and I'll be addressing the amount of false spirituality out there. And in that book I will try to show how certain practices and beliefs which were introduced from the Far East and even from the South Americas and such are in no way helpful but actually harmful. And in that book, the 6th book, which is almost finished actually, the 6th book is almost done. In that 6th book, I'll bring people back to where all of creation comes from and where all these belief systems came from, because the Bible talks about the people of God, the holy people, the ghosts, the ghouls, the Holy Ghost people, the Gauls would be exiled from their lands, and they were exiled to the ends of the earth, but the Gauls themselves have gave many things to the world, and that's exactly what the Bible talks about. But it talks about being returned back to the land in the last days, and this is what the heavens explain. But we can't understand or understand these things and we can't return to the land or know how important it is to return to focusing upon the land unless we know what the heavens are. And even as we look at each story, I'll be able to show and break down what they all sort of mean, and how that relates to the British Isles being not just the Holy Lands, but also the Greek lands, Babylonian lands, the Sumerian lands, the Akkadian lands, and all these ancient civilizations that we all know of and have heard or read about. So we'll look at Artemis. We'll just look at a couple of websites, and I'll pick out some stuff from those pages, and it's easier this way that I can read from somebody else's website and piece together what I've discovered already. Interference again, I hope it isn't permanent. I will unplug my speakers and see if we can get rid of it again. So we're on this page. I'm not even sure what page it is. Let's move my thing over to the side. It's worldhistoryedu.com, and I'm just any random page because the thing is, what I've realised is that the stories, it's the same. It's just, no matter where you read about these mythologies and that, most people are taking the same stuff and repeating the same stuff. So, and this is how I've learnt to read the heavens, read the standing stones. The Pictish standing stones, because this is the thing, the Pictish standing stones, and this is why I've chosen Artemis or Ursa Major, because Ursa Major is Artemis to the Greeks, and this is why I've chosen this, because when you know who Artemis is and you know what's on the standing stones, the Pictish stones, you'll see this crescent moon, an upside down crescent moon. It's turned upside down for a reason most of the time, because a great disaster happened in the British Isles, and it changed the climate and it changed everything. People fled, and the ancient traditions that were thriving here and the lands which were a tropical climate here changed for the worse for many hundreds of years. And it's during that time that they have sacked our history, rewrote our history, and buried the truth and transported the truth to other places, burying exactly who we are. But the heavens and the Great Bear, the North Celestial Pole, and the tree never moves, and therefore the story, if we can read it in the heavens, as it says in Genesis 1:14, the stories will be signs and the seasons and the omens are when for us. So this is the incredible story of Artemis, her myth, symbol and significance in ancient Egypt. Ancient Greeks held the belief that the goddess Artemis was the one in charge of wild animals, greenery and the moon. And as I just mentioned, the moon's very important because you see the moon in all the Pictish stones, the moon. I'll just mention here as well, the ancient Greeks, I'm not holding back, I'm just going to say the north of Britain, the very north of Britain, Caledonia, the Caledonian Bull and Hunter and Heracles and all that sort of stuff. That didn't happen in the Mediterranean or the Near East. It happened here. Northern Scotland is ancient Greece. Aberdeenshire and the Morayshire area is ancient Thracia, and it all happened here and it's in the heavens. So I'm not being shy about it. I'm just going to say straight out, whether you agree with that or not, I don't care. I read the signs, I read the standing stones, and this is what I'm trying to prove. And I'm not going to beat about the bush with it. I'm just going to say, because otherwise we're never going to see it. So the ancient Greeks held the belief that the goddess Artemis, and the name Art is very important, because the Gallic people seen the Great Bear. This is what we're looking at, Ursa Major, the Great Bear, the plough, the wain. Again, the word wain is very important. It means child, but in Scotland, a wain is a child, and it also means a wheel. So the Great Bear was seen as the wheel, and the word Art means bear in Gaelic. She was the one in charge of wild animals, greenery and the moon. Another very interesting part here, that King David I of Scotland, he loved and served most of his life, we know, in the northern parts of Aberdeen, because it was a great forest and he loved hunting there. And places like Kintor is the King's Tor, the King's Hill, and King's Seat, it was the King's Seat, King David's seat. And King David I of Scotland hunted here, and there is actually a town in the northeast. I think it's inland, it's about 35 miles inland, and it's called Huntly in Aberdeenshire. And the reason why it's called that, I believe the sign outside Huntly is like a stag's antlers, and the reason why it's called that is, as we go on, you'll see that Artemis is represented as a stag or a deer, and always represented with the boar, the wild boar, or the wild hunt. So she was a member of the three maiden goddesses of the Olympians. The other two were Athena and Hestia. I mentioned this earlier in the earlier video, that the three maiden or virgin goddesses, you could say maiden, but it's actually three virgin goddesses of Olympus, were Athena, Demeter, who became the bear, or the Ursa Major. They were the virgin goddesses, and this is exactly the same as what we see as the three Bridgets, which is the Creach or the Cruach, the Caelach, the old maiden, the young maiden, the child, the young girl. It's exactly the same thing, and what it really represents is part of the mind, the part of the veil, the innocence that has to be broken or go through in order to reach maturity. Really, that's what it represents. I was going to say there that to the Romans it represented Diana, and this is why we've seen the sacrifice of Princess Diana, because it's the same story. But I'll read the story. The story of Artemis is when she dies, she's placed in the heavens as the Great Bear. But let's see what these have to say, because as I go through it, there'll always be something that I've found in my research, and I'll say, well, this is why they're repeating this, because like I said, they repeat the same stories in all the website pages and whatever. They even use the same terminology and the same words, and some words are very important, some words stand out. For instance, the word maiden goddesses, three maiden goddesses. Well, right away it's exactly the same as what we understand as the Celtic, and we put Celtic in brackets and apostrophes because Celtic wasn't really a people. The reason why is because it was just it was an artistic sort of period where they call it the Celtic, just like the Renaissance. But the Celtic people were actually Picti, or Brythonic, or Gaels, just called Gaels. But they created the Celtic stories and gave them Celtic names, which of course they were not just Greek stories, because it's here, but the Greeks were Celts too, and the lands were all here. If you go to Greece, you can't see these things. I've said this many times. You look at the heavens, you can't see these stories. So the story of Artemis and Zeus and Hercules and, you know, all these stories could never have happened in present day Greece, because they can't see it. And if you go back 10,000 years, 17,000 years, the poles shift, but still they can't see it. There's only one place you can tell the stories of the Bible. There's only one story where you can explain the stories of the Quran, the Veda text. There's only one place in the world where you can view the entire story in the heavens, and that is here in the United Kingdom. And that is why the legal system, the bar is the word the bear, and Artemis is the art of the bear, the art of law, the art of the great law. Remember that these deities, they didn't really exist as energies, but these deities disguised themselves in creatures, and that is the art of law, to disguise yourself in the detail. And this is what it's all about. So the ancient Greece held the belief that the goddess Artemis is the one in charge of wild animals, greenery and the moon. So the Caledonian forest was well known to exist during the Roman times when they were here in Britain. A member of the three maiden goddesses of Olympus, and Olympus, as I've said before, sits in Loch Lomond, Loch Nagat sort of area. The virgin goddess was very much loved and venerated by the people and loved in the countryside of ancient Greece. She didn't actually choose to live on Mount Olympus, she chose to live in the wild. Artemis was the daughter of Zeus. So you have Tiamat and the Apsu, and you have Enki and Leo and all that going on, and you had the first gods, and here we have, from the Greek point of view, Greek perspective, the forming of the constellations, and Artemis is the daughter of Zeus. The great bear, who became the great bear, is the daughter of Zeus, king of Olympus, Mount Olympus. He's the daughter of course, Leto, who is a titan, or a titaness. And so we have this story of the Apsu, Tiamat, the Apsu, the titans being formed, and from the titans you have Zeus taking a wife. He didn't actually take a wife, he just slept with her, as he did with all his concubines, and gave children and half-breed children to the world. And so he and Leto produced, the Titan, produced twins, which is very important, and this is very important, I'll say it again, it's very important, it's 3 times I think I said it. The twins is mentioned here, as I said, the writings, the clues are all in the words. The twins is the splitting of the atom, or the splitting of the sun. It's Apollo and Artemis were twins. So what I'm finding is, in all these stories, it's Tiamat and Apsu, who are the primordial deep, and they sit over, the Apsu is ABZ, Aberdeen area, which sits over the Balmoral area, which is where Draco sits in the heavens. We'll look at Draco in more detail. We're still looking at Artemis, the bear here, but Draco sits over in the Aberdeen area, and over the other side, towards the Inverness and Fort George area, you have Draco sitting there. Draco's one of the biggest asterisms up there. It coils round, but over in Fort George sort of area, and at Inverness area, and then down that solstice line, it's actually a fault line down through Inverness to Fort William and Oban. Down there sits Hydra. So Hydra is the Tiamat, the female beast with the many heads, which it talks about in Revelation. The beast that got power from the first beast, the dragon. And the dragon, of course, is Draco. So the multi-head beast Hydra, who Hercules dealt with, cut off all its head except one, and it disappeared into the area we know as Loch Ness. So of course the Loch Ness monster is the Hydra, and that is Tiamat. And Tiamat and Apsu, ABZ for Aberdeen. Apsu is the great dragon, the Draco, who sits over Balmoral in the northeast of Aberdeen, coiling around the house of Cephas. And they too had offspring. And of course what we read in the Enuma Elish is that Apsu was not happy with the noise of these younger gods and sought to kill them, and he consulted with his advisor, the Mumu, the Munster men, and the Mumu said, kill the gods. And so what we see is here, at this point in time, we're looking at the great bear who is now formed in the heavens, and it is Artemis, the daughter of Zeus, an Olympian, and a daughter of the Titans, and Apsu and Tiamat have sought to destroy these offsprings, because they're just making a lot of noise. And what happens is the gods, which we read as is Enki or Enlil, or Marduk, which is the same in the Greeks, the same stories, but it's Zeus and Apollo, and these are the gods that take down the great dragons. And in the Greek story, it's Typhon or Typhus, and that's Cetus, the Kraken, another beast, which is further down the canopy, which we'll look at later on. But we're still looking at Artemis, the great bear here, Ursa Major, and Artemis is one of the offspring, basically, that's what I'm saying, of Tiamat and Apsu, which is the primordial deep. in the waters of Balmoral in Aberdeenshire, immediately under the North Celestial Pole, because this is what we're looking at here. We're looking at the North Celestial Pole, and so what I was talking about there is Aberdeenshire, the House of Cephus. Later on as we go through, I'll show you how the alphabet was formed. A, when we go to school, I was saying this to someone the other day, when we go to school you learn A is for apple, B is for book, C is for cat. It doesn't matter where you go, it's indoctrination, it's spellcasting. What we knew before, how we learnt letters and alphabet before, is as a child you look up at the heavens and you would see A for art, Arthur, A, B, bet, house. So this is your starting point, 0 or 0, 1, 2, 3, and in Hebrew this would be Aleph, Aleph, the alpha, the bear, Aleph, or Aleph, Aleph, or Alpha in Greek. So it's all there in the heavens. And Alpha, Bravo, is the house, the good house, and it's the House of Cephus because it's shaped like a house. If I put the shape of the asterism on, you actually see the shape of the house. So that's the letter B, and the Hebrew letter B is bet, means house. And let's go down to, let's put it on again. And this is the camel, the Gimel, Kamala Harrison, one of the first, the camel of the first, Harrison, Kamal Harrison. And this is the Gimel, A, B, C, G, C and G really, camel, C for camel. And that's how we would have learnt A, B, C. D is for Andromeda, Delta, the Delta, which is the Nile Delta. And E for the Elohim, the gods, and so on and so on. So yeah, so we're gonna, oh, we just don't know what popped that up. There's nothing but problems with this. But we'll pause it for a minute because there's 32 minutes so far, that's quite good.